All right, so great to see you guys again. Coming to you here from Consensus in Austin, still making the rounds here. We'll have a full roundup on what happened at Consensus, hopefully by next week, going to give you a full insight to it, my take on it. But also today, I want to get into some of the regulatory scenarios that are playing out. Also, a little bit of news around Bitcoin and some of the legislation preparatory work that may be occurring as well. So we'll be looking at the Policy Institute, a little of things, everything from, gosh, you name it. We'll have Ted Cruz, all that. Anyway, we're going to break it down for you guys today. We'll have a little bit around the world, including even some clips from Kevin O'Leary. So make sure and catch the full episode for all that good stuff. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. All right, so I want to go to this clip here, and this is really more about the debt ceiling. It has a lot of sweeping implications of how this may get through Congress and then eventually maybe even land up on President Biden's desk. There's a lot here, I think, that we need to be paying attention to. Listen to what they had to say over at MSNBC.
Basically, it appears Speaker McCarthy is buckling again to those extremists on his right flank. The House voting tonight on this Republican budget bill. McCarthy had put concessions in there to those so-called hardliners, or whatever you want to call them, including Congressman Gates. McCarthy had previously said for several days that he would not be, quote, reopening the bill.
Will you reopen the bill?
No, we're going to pass the bill on the floor. You guys not listen to my answer? But yeah.
Did you not listen? Well, apparently neither did some of the members of his caucus. There's a kind of a view of another McCarthy fold. Politico reporting that he had to submit a, quote, dead in the night rewrite in order to get the support. All of this stems from something that we have also been eyeing, which is what exactly is the arrangement of this Republican caucus? What is the deal with Gates and others? And how does Gates feel about all this? Well, he went on national TV crowing about conditions they put in place that requires McCarthy to do what they want.
I'm not falling for that trick. My colleagues who put conditions on Speaker McCarthy are not going to fall for that trick. Features of the deal that allowed Kevin McCarthy to ascend to the speakership require him to fight on top-line spending levels in this debt limit battle.
Gates, of course, going into his vault, one of his greatest hits in his mind. Indeed, he discussed it with us right here on The Beat, that he says there's a reason why he helped block McCarthy from becoming speaker initially. Indeed, it took over 14 votes. They ran out of things to ask for, is how he once put it. The budget includes trillions of dollars in cuts. The bill, meanwhile, has just passed tonight. As for the Senate, well, that's a whole nother conversation.
All right, so whether or not this can even make it through is going to be the bigger question here. And I think this is the thing that we need to be watching closely as we near into how the budgetary scenario plays out. And this has, kind of rolling impacts around the industry. You just saw the GDP numbers also declining from this time last year in big ways. You also have other kind of global activities that are happening that I think also start to really address some of the things that we constantly face here in the United States. And I don't want this to always be about the US, because that's not necessarily the case, because we have a global audience completely. There's a lot of growth in other areas. I think that was shown even here at Consensus. This is the one that I think is probably the most telling, and that is the UK Treasury opens its tax policy consultation on DeFi staking and lending. So already we're starting to see movement, and Mika is, what, a week old, I guess, now? In terms of its passing. The actual rollout will happen in 2024. But Treasury said it wants to create a regime that better aligns with the underlying economic substance whilst reducing the administrative burden on users. Good move. Under the proposed changes, the use of crypto assets and DeFi transactions would no longer be treated as giving rise to a disposal for tax purposes. Instead, a tax disposal would arise when the crypto assets are economically disposed of in a non-DeFi transaction. This is good because it's kind of like you're not taking, capital gains until you sell. And I think the fact that they're already moving in this direction already shows some pretty significant opportunities for crypto, but more importantly, a big opportunity for the EU, ironically, and also other countries outside of the United States. Because right now I feel like the technology scenario is up for grabs. There's a lot going on in the space right now, and it's up for grabs. I want to jump over to another couple clips here.
I thought one of the biggest mistakes of recent was Coinbase litigating the SEC.
Ooh.
That sounds like a really bad idea. That does not advance the industry in any way. It makes institutional shareholders cringe that they would be shareholders in Coinbase and be litigating their regulator. Very bad political move. And if I were a shareholder of Coinbase, and I'm not, I would let my displeasure known to the board. This is the kind of thing you want to change management for. And I'm certainly not suing them. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Yikes.
And I've seen lots of stupid ideas, but that is the top of the cherry. That strategy is so dumb. It guarantees you an impasse in perpetuity.
Wow.
And I think that the companies that do that, we don't have to name them, are going to have to change their boards and managers before they ever get any traction.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because those reputations are done. In other
Destroyed.
words.
I thought one of the biggest mistakes.
My take on that is pretty basic. I mean, first of all, Kevin, I don't know if he remembers, but he's done some pretty dumb things right here recently. I think we can probably name a few. But the point is that Coinbase is bringing up a point that really boils down to the SEC just not giving an F about responding to their situation. And I think any company, public or traded or not, if they have that kind of scenario where a government agency is absolutely just denying, not even denying, but just ignoring you, then at some point you're going to have to kind of call what it is. And I think that's something that will continue to be the case. I don't think this is a dumb move by Coinbase. I think this is a good strategic move. There may be some other points to this, and I've talked about them before on the show. So I think it's one that we're going to watch very closely. It's a very interesting one. We've got to get Meta Lawman on here to talk a little bit more about the Coinbase situation. But listen to what he also had to say about crypto regulation. Listen to this clip.
Entirely wrong. It's dead to institutional investors.
Oh, wow.
So I index. We do indexes. I speak to sovereign wealth and pension a lot, and they will not touch crypto until there's regulations. So for all the excitement, Bitcoin is locked in purgatory to set a trade 17 to 35,000 for a long time, because it's basically the same people trading it back and forth. And there's no new money coming into it. It's not an institutional product where they get a 5% allocation.
Again, Bitcoin, the issue on crypto regulation, I think he's really more talking about stablecoin regulation. The aspect of that Kevin is probably not hitting on as much is that the crypto industry is a global market. This has been mentioned many times by us. Obviously, you guys know over half of our channel is international. And when I say global market, you've got Mika already coming in with regulatory guidance on this. This is going to blow up in Europe. We already have guidance in the Middle East. We already have guidance to a certain extent in the Pacific Rim, including Hong Kong, now starting to play into it. Really outside of, and even to our partners in the North with Canada, with ETFs. Outside the United States, it's also becoming somewhat of an island. So I don't necessarily agree that crypto is dead. I think it's maybe the United States is dead in one of the most innovative technologies that has ever taken place in our history. All right, so this other clip is him talking about the number of banks that could still be at risk here. Pretty significant. Listen to what he had to say.
Call it a pig in the python of commercial real estate. It's got to go through the pig.
Interesting.
It's a really big $500 billion loss. Has to be absorbed. It'll wipe out 15% of the regional banks. Cull us all.
A lot more bank failures.
Oh yeah, but it's not that bad. It's
Don't mind. It's not that bad. Bankruptcies.
Everybody keeps saying, "Oh my goodness, the Bank of Zortmaster is going to go to zero." Who cares? The American economy is so large.
The locals do.
Yes, but it changes your behavior to be a better investor later. You will never put your money into a bank run by an idiot.
Okay, so again, this is elitist speak, by Kevin. It's pretty clear, if you lose 15% of the community banks, this would be a major blow, not only to the banking system, but more importantly, the confidence of the American consumer and the American retail investor. For him to assume that you're never going to put your money into a bank that's run by an idiot. First of all, nobody does nor could understand, I think, in the masses of what idiot is running which bank. Let's just assume they're all idiots now, and that be the case. But the point being here is that his idea around the fact that we're going to see more bank failures, that to me is concerning. When you have the kind of money that O'Leary has, it's probably not as concerning because he's obviously in one of the big five. But the core of the U.S., this is a problem. And I would not list Silicon Valley Bank as, the bank of whichever country or state. I definitely wouldn't look at even Republic. These are very significant banks that are under scrutiny and have started to take a pretty much huge beating. So this to me is a latest statement that I just don't think I don't think Kevin is completely in on this for sure. And again, his opinion, whether you think and love Kevin O'Leary or not on Shark Tank, that's his real character. That's the one he needs to be doing. His investment stuff, at least based on what I'm seeing, is just is ho hum at best.
I think Bitcoin is clearly the alpha in the crypto sphere, both in terms of coming first and also being clearly the most dominant. I think the analogy of digital gold is powerful. And the insight that led to its creation is still extraordinary. Listen, I'm a Bitcoin investor personally. I have a standing buy order. Every Monday morning I have a buy of Bitcoin that comes in, and I own a little more than 2 Bitcoins. So it's and every Monday I own a little bit more.
This, I think, is a good thing, but also could be a little bit of a bad thing. And that's only because Cruz is looked at as, I won't say a charlatan within Capitol Hill, but he's got his agendas in it and he's clear. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to align with people like that, but I completely understand, if he's out there, kind of singing Bitcoin praises. Listen, the more we have, at least in the regulatory ranks, the better. It's possible that he might be able to open up some eyes on education. Let's go over to Cynthia Lummis. This is Cynthia Lummis. She's talking a little bit here as well. Same conference. Let's jump to this one.
Bitcoin is a commodity. Bitcoin belongs at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Not all other cryptocurrencies are as open source, I'll use that word, as Bitcoin. Consequently, our focus in legislation has very much been on everything but Bitcoin, so that we can provide adequate consumer protection, adequate disclosures, and make people aware that yes, there are fraudulent cryptocurrencies, and certainly there are companies that use legitimate cryptocurrencies in fraudulent ways.
Let's dig into this piece of legislation a little bit more. So the Responsible Financial Innovation Act, this piece of legislation seeks to create some guardrails, essentially, that the industry knows that they can fit into. Right now, I think there's a lot of, you hear this buzz phrase thrown around a lot, regulatory uncertainty, and it's basically companies just saying, tell us what we can't do, right? And rather than regulation by enforcement of saying, gotcha, you did something wrong, and companies going, well, we didn't know that was wrong. I think a lot of folks are just looking for some sort of clarity or certainty. So could you walk us through what problems that your legislation is trying to solve?
We want to make sure that for cryptocurrencies that have more in common with securities, that the ability to custody and lend within the same business entity is not a good idea, that the disclosures that really the SEC is good at, they're good at shepherding disclosure for consumer protections. So we want to make sure that the SEC is involved, but not through enforcement actions, through the actual submission of information that can help a buyer, a consumer, make an informed decision.
All right, so you got a couple of good statements there. Again, I think these are somewhat obvious, and that is that almost every industry in its birth deals with the bad side of its business. And that goes back to mobile, social, the internet itself. I think we're in that phase right now. The good thing is, as I mentioned earlier, even here from Consensus, is I feel like we're starting to see a little bit of professionalism leveling up the industry. And I think that's what it's going to take, unfortunately, to actually get these lawmakers not on our side, but to understand this is a real business, these are real business entities, and it's going to continue to explode into all sorts of industries going forward. I think we had one more clip on Gilibrand. Let's listen to, or
Some
not on
tax
Gilibrand, but on
components, some
Lummis.
penalty components, the clear separation of custody from lending. I, for one, am opposed to a U.S. Central bank digital currency. Some other people are more favorable to it. So we had proposed a study of it. We may leave that on the cutting room floor going forward, but these discussions are still ongoing because the House Financial Services Committee, as well as the House Ag Committee on the commodities side, are more engaged in this than they used to be as well. And you heard, I understand, from some of those folks this morning, which is great. So we want something that will pass. I don't want to get in a spitting contest with the House of Representatives. I don't want to separate the House from the Senate, the Democrats from the Republicans. I want something that is workable for this industry that will not stifle innovation.
All right, so that's probably the most promising statement she gave us, is something workable for this industry that does not stifle innovation. Yeah, so I want to jump to another clip here, and that is one from her bill partner. This is coming over from Gilibrand.
I've had a heavy lift, but I think Senator Gilibrand's lift has been heavier because there's more resistance in her party to something that was not created by government and that government cannot control. Because our parties take fundamentally different approaches to the merits and demerits of government control. I tend to look askance at government control, and her party has a tendency to look favorably on government control. And so she's had a much heavier lift than I. And she has been, you know, a valiant advocate and was the perfect person to have working on this.
All right, so I think, you know, it was a big praise for Gilibrand, and I think carrying over, you know, from the Democratic side, it is a big lift, and I think this is something that we'll continue to see. But one thing I've noticed here, if you look at some of the Dems that are already starting to kind of join in on that, I wouldn't say that Gilibrand is the only one out there right now that is starting to move in this direction. So we are starting to see some bipartisan movement. The other thing that is ironic around this is that there's a lot of money starting to pour into the space. Likelihood is maybe that's the reason we're starting to see some of this movement here in the stages we are. Because remember, at the end of the day, guys, our officials are after one thing, and they're after support because they're trying to run campaigns and be able to be reelected. That takes money and obviously donors. So this will be interesting to continue to see this play out. I've got a couple more clips. I think I got one more clip here. This is how to win over the other side. So listen to this one right here.
When you come and give examples to senators, representatives, and their staff about how this can help the unbanked, the underbanked, the underserved, those that lost money when SVB went down, when Credit Suisse encountered those problems, and the losses that we're now hearing about at First Republic. I mean, if that money was in Bitcoin, yeah, the value fluctuates, and once, you know, hedging becomes more mature and the asset comes more mature, some of those highs and lows will begin to also smooth out. But the point is, their money would still have value. And when people start realizing, I can put money in a bank, but I can only put 250,000 in an insured account. That the limits of fiat currency and banking and fiat currency as a secure and safe asset have also kind of been revealed and disclosed to people.
All right, so I don't really know how to unpack that. First of all, I feel like there is a little bit of hesitancy in understanding really how the markets are reacting to this. The other thing is I feel like there's a bit of audacity in our government, and this happens all the time, I think, with all of our government, and that is that we are the center of the universe, meaning the United States. I don't necessarily think that is the scenario playing out in crypto. This is a much broader market that's going to be really manipulated, I think, from outside the United States, more so, even more so now, because of the regulatory environment that might, exist here. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I think the other scenario is that the unveiling of the banking system was just unveiled. I think a lot of people knew about the 250. They didn't understand that there were banks out there doing these kinds of leveraged loans, in essence, that basically put their money at risk. I think the bigger question here is going to be whether or not the American people, because remember, she says you only have to have 250,000, like as if that's not a lot of money. Maybe not to her. Most people, it's not the limit of the insurance. It's the fact that a bank may go out of business and you've got to go through the hoops of getting your money out, and then whether or not you may even get your money out, depending on how all of the payouts, because I mentioned this is what bank runs do. People will do these bank runs based on confidence in the banking system. This is the bigger scenario that's facing, I think, the industry right now. It's just exactly what, Kevin O'Leary, again, kind of sloughs it off, because a bank run on him for one of his 50 banks that he's got is probably nothing, but a bank run on an individual that has less than 250K and that's their only account, that's a big issue. And that's consumer confidence. And once consumer confidence is lost in the banking system, now you talk about flight to safety. That most likely will go back on the scenario of people talking about that there's a lot of new liquidity going into the markets. I think at that point, this is where retail investment might start to look at it, because money markets will be somewhat risky. We'll start to see gold maybe as the other opportunity, but I think Bitcoin and possibly some of the major high cap alts will be the winners around all this. If you guys are not following me on Twitter, it's very simple. Catch me out there at Paul Barron. We'll see you next time right here on TechPath.